It's Pyram King, and I'm really excited to bring to you a Curse of Strahd interview, and we have a special guest. It's Steve with Lunch Break Heroes. Steve, I'm a huge fan of yours. I watched your videos to help me run my own campaign. Then obviously a lot of your PDF guides and stuff helped me create Legends of Barovia. So I'm really excited that you're here to join me today. But I thought before we get into the Curse of Strahd questions, you could tell everybody a little bit about yourself, Dungeons and Dragons, Curse of Strahd, but also a lot of the big projects. You have one successful Kickstarter, you're launching another one. Learn a little bit about all the things that you're providing to our wonderful community.
Yeah. Hey. Well, like Pyram said, I am Steve, and I am Lunch Break Heroes. So this is a kind of a one-man operation, and has been since late 2020, and I'm still going strong, and I hope to continue bringing all of you some great content long into the future. So we started off with module guides. I ran a series on Lost Mine of Phandelver, and then I did Curse of Strahd, which really struck a chord with the wider D&D community. There's a lot of people playing Curse of Strahd, as it turns out, and they really liked my guides. So I kept making them and then turned them into downloadable PDFs, and that launched Lunch Break Heroes as a legitimate business. And so now here I am, years later, trying to expand it and doing other offerings like the Deck of Many Quests, which was a Kickstarter we did in 2021. Then this past year, I did an expansion for it, the Deck of Many Quests Gothic Horrors. And this year, I am bringing you an anthology of horror adventures in our first book, Libris Nocturnum. So this is 13 horror adventures that take your characters from level 0 to level 12 across a terrifying landscape, where they will meet over 30 new creatures who will hunt, haunt, and terrify your characters to the ends of the earth and into alternate dimensions. So definitely check that out. You can get more information on 5ehorror.com or over on Kickstarter.
I just want to ask you a couple questions about your Deck of Many Quests, the Gothic version of that. Could you use that with Curse of Strahd?
You can absolutely use that with Curse of Strahd. It's what I would call a standalone expansion. You could just use the Gothic Horrors deck by itself, but it's 54 cards versus 300 in the main Deck of Many Quests. So you get fewer options, but it's all very horror focused.
Now, I also want to say, I know you didn't mention it. I am, full disclosure, a Patreon supporter of Lunch Break Heroes, and his adventures, one-shot adventures, which are amazing. If you want to play, in my opinion, some of the best one-shot adventures in Foundry with DM Andy's gorgeous maps, they're available through Lunch Break Heroes as well. So you should definitely check those out. I'm a big fan of those as well. So.
Those are available to our platinum tier patrons, and thank you, Pyram, for your help on some of those Foundry conversions.
And I'll be putting links to both the Patreon, the Kickstarters, the Decks of Many Quests down below. Now, we're going to be jumping into what everybody's been asking for, to ask Lunch Break Heroes some questions about Curse of Strahd. But before we get into your questions, I have two questions that I want to ask. My first two questions are, what is your favorite location and why? And who is your favorite NPC and why, but not Strahd?
Okay. My favorite location, I'm going to assume that you mean Curse of Strahd location. Yes. Because, other than that, maybe, the fast food restaurant down the road. My favorite location in Curse of Strahd. That is really kind of a tough one. Right now, I think it's going to have to be Krezk. And only because it's a location I recently ran. I'm running Curse of Strahd again for another group, and we hit up Krezk right around Christmas time. We were going to do it just before Christmas, but then something came up and we had to do it after Christmas. And I set up this whole Christmas sort of event for them. Not only because, well, 'tis the season, but I wanted to add a bit of levity into our game at at that juncture, because a lot of bad stuff had recently happened and they needed a break. You have to pace your narrative with the highs and the lows, the sads and the happies, and all of that. And so they arrive in Krezk on the eve of basically their Christmas. Okay.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And so the burgomaster, Dmitry Krezkov, he traditionally acts as the guy in the red suit. They call him Tomten, taken from one of our earthly traditions. And he goes around, and the tradition is Tomten will go from house to house. People leave at least one window open on this day, and Tomten will chuck little toys through their windows. His goal is to remain unseen in this snowy landscape, but that red suit makes it kind of hard. The children's goal is to catch him, pelt him with snowballs, and take as many toys as they can. So kids get toys either way, but it's fun for the kids and all of that. Well, in our game, Dmitry twisted his ankle, and so he asked one of our players to play the role of Tomten. And it became this very lighthearted, relaxed skill challenge as they had to, sneak around children's sentries and get to these houses and cross a snowball field where they were having, snowball fights. How do you get across this?
Wow.
Turns out it's by conjuring a ball of flame and just sprinting. But yeah, it was a lot of fun for them, and it brought a lot of levity to this location. And so it's kind of a fond location for me.
Oh, wow, wow. Okay, and the second one, who's your favorite NPC other than Strahd, and why?
My favorite NPC is, well, are we talking stock or ones that I've added?
Whichever one you want to share with us.
All right, so we'll do both. My favorite stock NPC, I think, is going to be the Abbot, because he's
Right.
actually, you know what? I'm gonna. It's probably a tie between the Abbot and Vargas Velakovich, because I love my most recent interpretation of him as this Southern gentleman who is just absolutely so polite, but is an absolute psychopath underneath. And he's a terrifying character, but the Abbot is very creepy and fun to play.
When you were
And in
doing
terms of the ones,
when you were doing that interpretation of him just now, the first thing that popped into my head was I forget the actor's name that played in oh my gosh, the House of Cards.
yes, Kevin Spacey.
That's right. I mean, that's just that image of his voice and his kind of smarmy way popped into my head.
Yes, sleazy on many levels. And in terms of the NPCs that I've added, I mean, there's no other answer than Buster the Bust.
Yes, I actually used Buster the Bust in my campaign. I thought it was a brilliant idea. I included it, made some little twists to that in Legends of Barovia. I think that was a brilliant idea. I really, really like that as well. Okay, I've got a list of questions from the community for you here. And so we're going to jump into the first one. And this is one that you probably see on Reddit a lot. I get this question a lot, and I'm sure you do as well. I am DMing Curse of Strahd for the first time. I've purchased the book. It seems a little bit overwhelming. What's the first thing you recommend that I should do to prepare for Curse of Strahd?
Well, first step is to read the darn book, cover to cover. Skim it, if you feel you have to, but get an overall sense of what all is there. Know what you are working with. You don't have to memorize it all. In fact, you're going to forget probably 90% of it, but at least you'll know, aha, I have werewolves coming later. I've got undead knights here. I've got all these little pieces. Figure out the details later, but get the broad strokes by at least skimming through the book.
I think that's a great idea. It also is going to help you understand that kind of overarching plot and location so that you can improv a little bit better. The next question, do you recommend running the game rules as written Dungeons and Dragons, or including some homebrew rules like some Dungeon Master variants or other homebrew rules to add a Gothic level theme or flavor to the game? And if so, what homebrew rules would you add to the game?
Well, you're talking to the guy that basically homebrewed a whole expansion pack. So I'm never ever going to suggest running any module, let alone this one, rules as written. In fact, I think modules are written with the intention that people are going to homebrew the crap out of them and make them their own. But in terms of specific things to add, gosh, that's a difficult question because I haven't really added any special systems on top of my own games. Like I haven't dealt with sanity or anything like that, which could be an interesting addition. One change that I've seen more than one person make is using the gritty realism rules for resting, and that seems to work pretty well because combat in Curse of Strahd is not only deadly, but you can very easily make it few and far in between. So, yeah, sure, they come up on these 3 revenants in Argynvostolt who beat the crap out of them. Which, by the way, 3 revenants killed one of my PCs in one round and routed the entire party.
Wow.
In one of my previous games. And then, yeah, sure, maybe they need a day to rest. Maybe they need a week to recover. And as long as you don't have a ticking time clock, like you must deliver Ireena within X days, then you're pretty safe, That seems to work pretty well for some people. I've never used it myself, though.
The next question I hear that I've heard, and I'm sure you do as well, is the Madame Ava card reading is an iconic moment in Curse of Strahd. It's a unique thing in Curse of Strahd. Should I run it random or should I stack the deck in the card readings? And if I stack it, where do you recommend hiding those items from the Fortunes of Ravenloft?
Sure, yeah. I have 2 answers for that. If this is your first time running it, stack the heck out of that deck. Get what you feel is going to be the most impactful and varied adventure that you can. And then if you're running a second time, especially if your players have already done this before, randomize it. Have fun. Yeah, sure, your companion is Sir Klutz. Why not? But if you are stacking it, choosing your locations, I would recommend putting them in locations that do not correspond to any player backstory quests. That way you get the most coverage out of your game. You can cover most of the map of Barovia. If you've got a backstory that takes your characters to the werewolf den, don't put an item there. Put it in Argynvostolt instead. Okay? That way you have an excuse to go to both of those locations and not just one. And for me, on a particular item, the Tome of Strahd, I almost called it his diary, because let's face it, that's what it is. Dear diary, today I met a beautiful woman.
I was going to ask you to do an impression of Strahd.
Absolutely. For you, Pyram, anything. I recommend putting that in Strahd's coffin, because I've tried. I literally can't think of any logical reason for it to be anywhere else in Barovia. I mean, maybe he buries it under Marina's statue because he's just like, screw this, I don't want it anymore. But other than that, why would it be in some Vardo,
What about if like Van Richten or Esmeralda stole it and tried to use it to plot their way to try to destroy Strahd?
Then yeah, I mean, if that was one of the is that one of the card reading options? I can't remember.
I think Rotavio's wagon might be one. I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember. There's quite a few locations, and I think it would make logical sense for one of those vampire hunters to have his tome.
Just
other than that, I think in his coffin is really the most logical location for it.
And lastly, on the card reading, what's your thoughts about where Strahd is in Ravenloft? I suggested the Mist card just because you want to have it as a surprise, but do you have a different recommendation?
I like putting him on the top of the tallest tower.
Oh, wow.
Not only because blowing people off with a gust of wind is really fun, but it's just such a great imagery. You've got them climbing up to this tower. There's this cloud of bats, and then I like to have where Strahd can coalesce and disappear in a flock of bats. That's just it looks
Oh, that's
cool.
a great idea.
And this flock of bats just coalesces into this dark shape in front of them.
Wow.
And then their battle works from the top of Ravenloft all the way to the final confrontation in the basement.
Wow, in the catacombs near where his crypts are.
Yep, that's the final resting place. So, because I mean, it's kind of, if you go the other way, like, yeah, they start in the catacombs, they go up to the top, and then they kill him. Now they gotta hoof it all the way back down.
Yeah, yeah, gotta go up to go down.
Right.
The next one, and I've seen this question as well several times. I'm very concerned about it being such a deadly game. Should I be concerned about balancing the encounters, or is there any suggestion to approach this so maybe it's not so deadly, or how do I handle it being such a deadly campaign?
Right. That's one of those things that it's going to be a matter of both taste and experience and what kind of game you want to run.
Right.
If you're the kind of group that is attached to your characters and you really want to see these particular characters through to the end, then yeah, you may want to dial back some of those encounters, like those 3 revenants in the chapel,
Right.
maybe just 2. But if you're the kind of group where you're like, yeah, we live on the knife's edge and we've got this whole stack of extra character sheets right here, then go for it. Go for broke. Run it as written, because no, it's not balanced at all. I'm not 100% sure that they play tested most of Curse of Strahd.
Certainly not the bone
But
grinder.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be balanced. It's a deadly area where, yeah, you walk around the wrong corner, yeah, you're dead. And that's part of its charm.
So perhaps in session 0, setting that expectation that the players need to assess whether they want to go into combat, or maybe retreating is a better option in some situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
This is another interesting question. Ireena Tatyana storyline is pivotal to the plot. What happens if Ireena is killed or the party doesn't take any interest in Ireena? How would Strahd react, and what would you do in your campaign if that were to happen?
Well, I'm gonna actually disagree that Ireena's pivotal to the plot. She's really more of a MacGuffin, to
Okay.
be perfectly honest. She can set the players on their journey, and if they're the kind of players that will they'll take the baited hook and they'll run with it, then yeah, they're gonna care. They're gonna care about Ireena, at least in character. They're gonna bring her along with her, and that's great. But if they're not, that's also fine. So in those cases where your group doesn't care about Tatyana, they don't want to bring her along, whatever. Your characters are the main characters. They are the ones that are pivotal to the plot,
Right.
along with Strahd. Those are the only 2 points that really matter in this equation. Everything else is adjustable. Ireena could just be another incarnation that dies and gets swept away by the mist. Maybe she does it off screen. Maybe it happens in one of your sessions. And then Strahd's like, well, bam, and goes back to his castle. But you're still stuck here and you need to go home. So figure it out.
The next question is something that I think you're going to help give some clarity to. This person writes, I am confused about the dark powers and the dark vestiges. Can you provide a simple clarity to the difference between them so I understand?
Yes. Yes and no. So 2 years ago, I would have had an unequivocal answer for you that I would say is 100% correct. Many would disagree with me, as is their prerogative. But then Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft came out and muddied the waters even more. So in Curse of Strahd, I think there's a contradiction between the introduction and the Amber Temple chapter in terms of how they're described, which led me to say these are 2 separate beings. Okay. All of that combined with information from previous editions, which is not canon in 5e, but fine, whatever. We're DMs. We mix things from different editions all the time. But then Van Richten's guide comes along and basically links the two inextricably. So it could go either way. I am still in the camp that the Vestiges and the Dark Powers are two separate beings. The Dark Powers own everything. They're in control. Why would they be trapped in amber sarcophagi? Okay, even if it's just their pinky toe that's trapped in there. The Dark Powers are also they're not named, they are not counted, and they have powers that are not explained anywhere. They have limitless power from a narrative perspective, which is how they can sweep away an entire landmass into its own demiplane.
Right.
The Vestiges in the Amber Temple are named, they are counted, and they have very defined powers. You know, Vampire is, well, he's a vampire. He can turn people into vampires. That's the range of his power. Feker, she's the queen of poxes. She makes people sick. That's the limit of her power. None of them are this all-powerful, nameless, countless being. So I say that they are separate beings. Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft says otherwise. Who are you going to believe? The guy who doesn't get paid by wizards or Wizards of the Coast?
I think it's whatever fits into your campaign or your storyline.
Absolutely.
This next question. There are no general stores or shops in Vallaki or Krezk. Oh, by the way, side note, my Vallaki guide's coming out soon, which will have that.
Nice. Nice.
Where do you recommend characters buy and sell goods or things that they need if there's really no general stores in the campaign other than Buildress Mercantile, I think, is the only one rules is written in the village of Barovia?
Arisek Stockyard.
Oh, yes, the Stockyard has a small store as well. I forgot about that.
Yep, they are Valaki's general store. I will point out that there's also no bathrooms in most of the locations, minus the Privy and Wizards of Wine. But we assume that your characters and other NPCs vacate at some point or another.
Oh, right, that's true.
So people get their stuff from places, and if you have to add a store, I mean, Valaki's got a town square. Yeah, absolutely. There's vendors there. People just trying to scrape by, make a living. Yeah, okay. Yeah, they've got some crappy, stuff that they scavenged off the last adventuring party that happened to saunter through. But yeah, just add a random store if you have to.
Okay, so
and my own Vallaki guide has several stores spelled out in it as well that you can quickly add.
Okay, and those are available to your Patreon, and you have the entire guide as well. I'll put a link down below for that on your Patreon site.
Well, the entire guide is actually available on lunchbreakheroes.com for free.
Oh, well, there you go. I'll put a link for that in the description down below. What are some of your recommended must changes to rules as written of locations or whatever, but something that you said you have to make this change regardless of what you're doing? Do you have anything like that you think is fundamental to Curse of Strahd, in your opinion, after running it and writing the guides?
Fundamental changes. I get rid of Sergei and the pool. In my Krezk guide, I did specify an alternate take on that still includes Sergei and expands on Ireena as a character, gives her some classes and all of that. But in my own game, I just get rid of it.
Okay.
Sergei is kind of he's not necessary to the narrative at all, and I think he takes away from Ireena as a character.
Okay. The next question here. Oh, I've heard some games enter Barovia from the west at Krezk. Do you recommend this change, and any suggestions on what you would do to make this change?
If you're running Curse of Strahd for maybe the third time, yeah, go ahead and start at Krezk, just for kicks. If you're doing it for the first or second time, nah, not really. I have a guide on some things that you can do and change. That's available over on Patreon. I don't think it made it into Raising the Stakes, the book.
Okay.
But yeah, you're going to have to change a lot of things. In this case, Dmitry Krezkov becomes your info dump instead of, say, the Vistani or Isaac, not Isaac,
Isaac.
Ismark,
Ismark.
Ismark,
Yeah.
yeah. Instead of them, it's going to be Dimitri. So he's going to prepare you, and then the Wizard of Wines, you can level it down a bit, or you can level up your characters, and go from there. It becomes a bit more of a difficult game because obviously the game is intended to go from east to west, not west to east.
Right.
But you can do it.
Yeah, I haven't done it, and several people have made that suggestion, and I kind of understand the thought process where it goes from Krezk and you hit Valaki, and then it gets more depressed as you get into the village of Barovia, which is really kind of the most depressing place of all of the
Oh,
cities.
absolutely. From a tonal perspective, I think it makes great sense. Um, if somebody were to go through the trouble of rebalancing the entire game and restructuring some of the encounters, maybe move the Amber Temple to the other side of Mount Gaucus,
All right.
then I think, yeah, you could do great. But as it stands, it's a lot of work. Maybe do it on your third time through.
The next one here is: do you recommend skipping the Death House and starting the party at level 3, venturing into the village of Barovia?
I don't recommend skipping an introductory adventure. Death House, maybe. But if you have a brand new group where the characters still need to gel, yeah, throw them through an introductory adventure. I ran my latest party through one of our original adventures, the Fog of Waymore.
Oh, I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah, where they start in this fog town. They meet in a tavern. That this town has some problems with a deadly killer fog, which is very analogous to the mists of Barovia.
Wow.
And then once they seal away the mists into this special little orb off in some crypt somewhere, they emerge from the crypt, and wow, these woods don't look familiar at all. And it's the Svalich woods.
That's a great introduction. That was a great way to use one of those great adventures that you have as an introduction. You've got the fog. They think they've captured it. They put it in the orb. Then they emerge from the crypt, and they're in Barovia. Wow, that's a really good idea. I'll have to remember
that eliminates the question of, well, how do we tie the Dursts and Death House to the larger narrative? Well, you don't have to, because they're not there anymore.
That's a level adventure, level 1, level 2, right?
Technically, it's written for level 3, but I mean, you can very easily ratchet it down a little bit. My level 1 characters had pretty much no problem with it.
Okay. Do you recommend buffing Strahd's stats or using the CR27, the Devil Strahd from DMs Guild?
I've never used the CR27, so I can't speak to it. But I think if you are running Strahd as dirty as possible and taking advantage of his mobility and expanding his spell repertoire, because if you stick with just his prepared spells, he's kind of gimpy. But if you open it up to where he has access to the entire wizard spell list up to his spellcasting level, of course, then I think he's a very formidable foe for any party of 11, 12, or maybe even 13.
Really?
Because this guy, he hits and he runs. He's got Bucephalus that can take him into the ethereal plane. He's got his legendary actions and resistances and lair actions and all of that. And he's got the tools. You just have to use them.
Right. I agree. In fact, I just released my guide to Strahd, and I think you don't really have to touch the stat block if you play him very strategically and tactically. Just adjust the spell list, and you could pretty much TPK a party of level 10 adventures if you play them fiercely. For sure.
You got to play dirty, mercilessly.
Do you have those are the questions that I have. Do you have anything that you feel is important that you want to share to everybody about Curse of Strahd? Some thoughts, particular locations, quest lines, anything like that?
I laid out most of my major thoughts in raising the stakes, and as I go through it again, I'm coming up with these small changes here and there, like in my latest playthrough, the Sun Sword, it doesn't belong to Sergei because Sergei isn't there anymore. It was actually the sword of Argynvost. And the blade disappeared mysteriously once Argynvost fell, and so my players recovered the blade, but the hilt is locked away in the mausoleum with the rest of Argynvost's remains, sans skull. And so in order to join this lightsaber together, they have to complete all of the Argynvost soul quests. So, there's a lot of malleability in Curse of Strahd and a lot of different things that you can take out and replace and move around. And it's one of those things that you can really have fun with and exercise your creativity as a game master.
I 100% agree. Curse of Strahd leaves a lot of what some would say is plot holes or areas, but I look at that as a huge opportunity for a creative dungeon master to weave in their own narrative into that. I also really liked, and I agree with you, and I did the same thing with the Skull of Argynvost. I think you did as well, where it's the skull that Baba Lysaga has. It's not in Ravenloft, right? I think,
Yeah.
I did the same thing. It was just sending
Because
them.
where the heck did the giant come from?
Yeah, where does the giant come from? And I was also thinking that skull is massive. For the players to get into Ravenloft and try to remove that skull, good luck. Good luck removing that big skull.
Does anybody have a hand truck?
So you're running it right now. How many players are in your current campaign?
3. I like to have 3 players in Curse of Strahd because safety in numbers is not a feeling I ever want to impart in Barovia.
So your opinion is, and this is a good question, where do you think that magic number is for party size? You like 3?
I like 3 because, they're inevitably going to get 1, maybe 2 companions. That's going to boost your numbers up. And if you get too high, then they're walking around in this big gang, and then it's just there's no tension anymore because they have the numbers to overcome pretty much anything.
Are you playing in person or are you playing online?
Online.
With the Foundry platform.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Anything else you want to share with us before we go?
No, I think that about covers everything I have. I just want people to, keep Libris Nocturnum in mind. Check out 5ehorror.com and keep an eye on its Kickstarter. We are launching March 15th.
March 15th is the Kickstarter. I've got the page up on the screen. You can see it there. I'm going to have a link down at the bottom. And by the way, where can we pick up those decks of many quests in the Gothic decks? Where are those available?
Lunchbreakheroes.com.
Okay. Make sure to pick those up. Make sure to check out his Kickstarter. His YouTube channel is full of great guides. Those are the guides that I use to run my campaign. I really appreciate the time. I know you're really busy and your schedule's busy, but I appreciate it in answering all these questions from the community for Curse of Strahd. Until next time, this is Parm King. May all your rolls be critically successful.
Have a good day.